PGA Tour in chaos. Phil Mickelson refuses LIV Golf's new demand. Players erupt. This isn't clickbait. It is the final implosion of golf's 4-year civil war. The man who started it all just said no to the league he helped build, and the locker room has finally snapped. And honestly, the pure, unadulterated arrogance makes you sick. Regular fans are scraping together $200 for a weekend tee time at their local public course, yet these country club millionaires are throwing tantrums over contracts they signed for 9 figures, while barely showing up to play. Phil Mickelson has played one event all year, one, and now he's refusing demands from a league that paid him $200 million? It is the purest example of elite entitlement you will ever see. But look past the surface anger. Mickelson isn't just being difficult. He is making a calculated play. He knows LIV Golf is collapsing. He knows the Saudi money is gone. And he knows that if LIV's new model requires players to accept paper value instead of guaranteed cash, his $200 million contract becomes worthless. He is protecting his bag while everyone else scrambles. That's why the other LIV players have finally turned on him. Let me show you exactly what LIV asked him to do and why Phil just burned his last bridge in professional golf. Personally, I think Phil just made the biggest mistake of his career. Do you agree? Or do you think he's playing chess while everyone else plays checkers? Drop it below. And if you want the real story behind golf's civil war, subscribe. Back in 2021, Phil Mickelson wasn't just a golfer. He was one of the most beloved figures in the entire sport. 50 PGA Tour wins, 6 majors, a Hall of Fame career spanning 3 decades. He was the people's champion, the left-handed magician who could pull off shots nobody else could imagine. When he won the PGA Championship at 50, becoming the oldest major winner in golf history, it felt like the perfect ending. Except it wasn't. By early 2022, the golf world was splitting apart. A new league called LIV Golf emerged, backed by hundreds of billions from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. They offered guaranteed contracts that made PGA Tour purses look like pocket change. Phil Mickelson signed a deal reportedly worth $200 million, but the way he did it left a bad taste. Mickelson publicly criticized the PGA Tour, calling their business model obnoxious and saying the Saudis were a chance to reshape professional golf. He admitted they had a terrible human rights record, but said he was willing to overlook it because this was an opportunity. That statement turned him from hero to villain overnight. He became the face of the rebellion. Golf's civil war had officially begun, and Phil Mickelson was holding the match. The betrayal felt personal to a lot of people. Fans who had cheered for him for decades suddenly felt like they didn't know him. His peers on the PGA Tour, guys he'd competed against for years, watched him torch the very system that had made him a legend. He went from being the sentimental favorite to public enemy #1 in a matter of weeks. The golf world doesn't forgive that kind of thing easily. That's the thing about golf. It's a sport built on tradition, on respect, on the idea that you earn your place through years of hard work and dedication. When somebody like Mickelson, who had been the ultimate example of that ethos, suddenly threw it all away for a paycheck, it felt like a betrayal of everything the sport stood for. His peers didn't just disagree with his decision, they felt personally insulted by it. And that wound has never really healed. Fast forward 4 years. That war has reached its final battle, and the man who started it all is standing alone. Because while his fellow LIV players are scrambling, Mickelson said no, not to the PGA Tour. He said no to LIV itself. He rejected their new demand. To answer what LIV asked him, we need to look behind the scenes. In April 2026, the Saudi Public Investment Fund announced they would stop funding LIV after the current season. No warning, no transition plan. After pumping more than $5 billion into this project, the Saudis decided they were done. The money tap was turned off. The reaction inside LIV was panic. Without Saudi money, there is no LIV. The whole league was built on unlimited cash. Now that cash was gone. The LIV Team Championship was canceled. The New Orleans event was scrapped. Prize purses were cut almost in half. Players who had been promised millions were suddenly looking at paychecks that didn't match. Then the lawsuits started. Fresh Tape Media sued LIV for unpaid fees. Mobi Systems sued for another $1 million. Vendors demanded payment. Staff got laid off. The whole operation was crumbling. And through all this, the players watched their guaranteed contracts become less guaranteed. They watched the league fall apart. and they realized the Saudi billions weren't forever. That's when LIV's CEO, Scott O'Neill, came up with a plan. He called it LIV 2.0. Instead of paying guaranteed cash, LIV would give players equity in the league. They would become shareholders. On paper, it sounded great. In reality, it was a disaster. Equity in a collapsing company is worthless. If LIV doesn't have Saudi money, it doesn't have any money. The equity is just fancy, meaningless paper, but O'Neill had to sell it somehow. He told the players LIV 2.0 would be sustainable, player-owned, the future of golf. All they had to do was accept equity instead of cash. And that's when Phil Mickelson said no. He wasn't the only one asked, but he was the only one who refused publicly, and that refusal changed everything. Mickelson signed a $200 million contract, guaranteed, legally binding. It was his. But if LIV 2.0 goes through, that contract becomes equity, shares in a company that might not exist in 6 months. Mickelson, 56 years old, who played only one event all year, who has family health issues, looked at that offer and said no. He wasn't trading guaranteed cash for worthless paper. He wasn't gambling his retirement on a dying league. And you know what? He was right. But the other players didn't see it that way. When Mickelson said no, he exposed the whole thing. He told everyone LIV 2.0 was a fraud. He said out loud what many were thinking but too scared to admit. And that's when the eruption started. Because once Phil said no, the floodgates opened. And the players who had been silent for years finally started talking. Let's start with Rory McIlroy. Rory has been the loudest critic of LIV since day one. At the BMW Championship in August 2026, he was asked about LIV's collapse and Phil's refusal. His response was brutal. Rory said LIV has never been good for the game, and now they're asking players to take equity? That's not a league. That's a house of cards. He said any LIV player who wants to come back faces a tough road back. They're not going to be welcomed straight away. There's going to be a process, and it's going to be painful. That's Rory's message. You made your bed, now lie in it. But not everyone agrees. Scottie Scheffler, the world #1, sees things differently. At that same event, he said there's definitely some LIV players that would provide value to the tour, but obviously there has to be penalties. Scheffler is basically saying, I want them back, but they have to pay a price. He's open to reconciliation. He's not holding a grudge like Rory. He wants the best players competing against each other. This is huge. If the world #1 says, let them back, and the second best says, keep them out, you have a split right at the top of the sport. Brooks Koepka is the one who actually came back. In December 2025, he accepted the PGA Tour's returning member program. He forfeited 5 years of player equity shares, became ineligible for the FedEx Cup bonus pool, had to donate $5 million to charity. Total financial penalty, around $50 million. He was the only one who took that deal. Jon Rahm didn't. Bryson DeChambeau didn't. Cameron Smith didn't. They all stayed with LIV. But now that LIV is collapsing, they're regretting it. The returning member program is closed. If Rahm wants back now, it'll cost him even more. Jon Rahm is probably the most desperate. He signed the biggest LIV contract, reportedly $300 to $500 million. He's been LIV's individual champion 3 times in a row. He's the face of the league, and now he wants out. Reports in August 2026 said Rahm is all but assumed to be leaving after the season. He's trying to figure a way back, but his contract runs through 2027. LIV might not survive that long. If the league collapses, who pays? Nobody. He'll be left with nothing. The irony is painful. The guy paid the most might lose the most. Bryson DeChambeau is keeping his options open. In August 2026, he led a player meeting at the LIV New York event about the future. Bryson didn't give answers. He's not committed to staying or rushing back. He's just waiting. The Golf Channel reported he'll play some DP World Tour events in 2027. Something in between. That might be the smartest move. Nobody knows what's happening next. Cameron Smith hasn't said a word publicly. He rejected the returning member program like Rahm and Bryson. He's still with LIV, but he's not talking. Silence is the loudest statement. He's watching and waiting. Even the guys who aren't superstars feel the pressure. Tyrrell Hatton and Joaquin Niemann have won on LIV in 2026. They've made good money, but they don't know what's next. They're stuck in the middle. The PGA Tour's CEO is Brian Rolapp. He came over from the NFL in 2026. He's been clear. There is no merger, no deal, no conversation. He said they've been focused on the PGA Tour and haven't had any dialogue with LIV. But even Rolapp can't ignore the internal split. Rory says keep them out. Scottie says let them back with penalties. Those are the two biggest voices in the locker room. And they're on opposite sides. That's the chaos. And what about Phil Mickelson? Where does he go from here? This is the saddest part. Phil has nowhere to go. The PGA Tour won't have him. He burned that bridge. LIV might not survive. If it goes under, his $200 million contract goes with it. He'll be 56 with no league to play in. He has a lifetime exemption for the Masters and the PGA Championship. 2 events. That's not a career. It's a farewell tour. He's dealing with other things too. Family health issues, a sexual misconduct allegation, expulsion from his country club. Everything is falling apart. The man who started this whole war might end up losing everything. The final irony is almost too perfect. Phil said he wanted to change golf. He said the PGA Tour was broken. He said LIV was the future. And he was right about one thing. The sport has been reshaped, but not in the way he imagined. The reshaped golf world has no place for Phil Mickelson. So where does this leave us? LIV Golf is on life support. The players are scrambling. The PGA Tour is divided. Phil Mickelson is isolated. Nobody knows what happens next. The final LIV event is scheduled for Indianapolis later this month. After that, the league might be done. Forever. When Phil walks off that 18th green in Indianapolis, it might be the last time we see him in a competitive event. The man who started the Civil War might end his career without a final battle, without a victory, without even a farewell. He'll walk off the course, and the world will move on. One question remains. When the final LIV event ends, and Phil Mickelson walks off that green, and the cameras stop rolling, will anyone even be watching? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want to stay ahead of golf's biggest stories, subscribe. Think about the journey that brought us here. The PGA Tour versus LIV Golf wasn't just a business dispute, it was a fundamental clash of philosophies. On one side, you had the traditional model, earn your spot, win your money, build your legacy over time. On the other side, you had the disruptor, guaranteed paydays, team formats, shotgun starts, and a complete disregard for everything that came before. Phil Mickelson was the bridge between those two worlds. He was the old guard who decided to burn it all down. And for a while, it looked like he might actually win. LIV was getting traction. Big names were jumping ship. The PGA Tour was scrambling to respond with increased purses and new events. It felt like the Saudis were actually going to pull this off. But the cracks were always there. The ratings never matched the hype. The team concept never really caught on with fans. The events felt hollow, like exhibitions rather than real competition. And the players, for all their guaranteed money, started to realize that winning a LIV event didn't carry the same weight as winning on the PGA Tour. The majors still mattered most. The history still mattered most. And LIV was never going to have that. Now, with the Saudi money drying up, the whole thing is unraveling faster than anyone expected. The players who thought they had secured their financial futures are looking at contracts that might not be worth the paper they're printed on. The ones who stayed loyal to the PGA Tour are feeling vindicated but also conflicted because they want the best competition, and some of those LIV guys are still elite players. This isn't just a story about money, it's about legacy. It's about what golf means to the people who play it and the people who watch it. Phil Mickelson had a chance to be remembered as one of the greatest of all time. Instead, he might be remembered as the guy who tried to tear the sport apart and ended up with nothing. The other LIV players are facing similar questions. Jon Rahm is young enough to rebuild his career, but it's going to cost him. Bryson DeChambeau is eccentric enough to make his own path, but even he can't escape the gravity of what's happening. Cameron Smith is quiet enough to avoid the spotlight, but that doesn't mean he's not feeling the pressure. And then there's the PGA Tour. They've won this war, but the victory is complicated. They have to figure out how to reintegrate players who left, how to heal the divisions in the locker room, and how to move forward without the distraction of a rival league. That's not going to be easy. The fans are the ones who ultimately decide what matters. And right now, they're watching a sport that's been through a lot. 4 years of civil war, 4 years of bad blood, 4 years of uncertainty, and now, finally, some clarity, even if it's painful. Phil Mickelson's refusal to accept LIV's new demand might be the final act of this drama, but it's also the beginning of whatever comes next. The golf world is going to look very different in 2027. Some players will be back where they started, others will be gone, and a few, like Phil, will be left wondering what it was all for. One question remains. When the final LIV event ends and Phil Mickelson walks off that green and the cameras stop rolling, will anyone even be watching? Drop your thoughts below. And if you want to stay ahead of golf's biggest stories, subscribe.